The False Dawn. The Vorthak Dominion's flagship cast its shadow across the ruins of Luna Base, humanity's last military stronghold. Commander Zelthar stood before the massive observation deck, his forearms clasped behind his elongated torso as he surveyed the destruction below. The battle had lasted exactly 17 hours. By galactic standards, it was embarrassingly brief. Beside him, representatives from the Galactic Supremacy Alliance watched with varying degrees of satisfaction. The insectoid Krex clicked their mandibles in approval. The crystalline shard hummed, with harmonic frequencies that indicated pleasure. Even the usually stoic void dancers seemed pleased, their ethereal forms flickering with contentment. Earth hung in the viewport like a blue marble scarred with fire. The planet's major cities still burned from orbital bombardment, though the flames were beginning to die. Humanity's desperate last stand had ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. Their final warship had surrendered just 3 hours ago, its captain broadcasting defeat on all frequencies. Zelthar turned to address his fellow conquerors. His voice resonated through the chamber with the authority of 1,000 conquered worlds behind it. The human infestation has been cleansed. Their primitive vessels could not stand against our combined might. As predicted, their emotional nature and chaotic strategies proved insufficient against superior tactical planning. The Krex representative, Ambassador Zektor, stepped forward on his 6 legs. His compound eyes reflected the burning earth below. The efficiency of this campaign will be remembered for generations. 3 standard cycles from first contact to complete subjugation. The humans barely managed to destroy 12 of our vessels. Pathetic. What troubled Zelthar, though he would never admit it publicly, was how easily the humans had fallen. Intelligence reports had suggested a species of remarkable adaptability and cunning. Their history showed countless examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones through innovation and determination, yet when faced with the combined might of the Galactic Supremacy Alliance, they had crumbled like dried leaves. The shard entity, known only as resonance, projected its thoughts directly into their minds. The division of resources should begin immediately. My people claim the mineral rights to their asteroid belt. The rare elements there will fuel our expansion into the next spiral arm. Zelthar nodded. The Vorthak Dominion would take Earth itself, along with the 3 colony worlds the humans had managed to establish. Mars would go to the Krex for their breeding farms. The Void Dancers wanted only the right to harvest human neural patterns for their consciousness archives. A junior officer approached, his scales shifting to a submissive green color. Commander, the occupation forces report full compliance from human survivors. They are gathering in designated zones without resistance. Population count stands at approximately 4 billion across all territories. 4 billion survivors from an estimated 12 billion. The mathematics of conquest were always brutal, but necessary. These humans would serve their new masters well. Their physical strength and endurance made them valuable for labor. Their creativity, properly controlled, could benefit the Alliance's technological development. Begin the integration protocols, Zelthar commanded. I want processing centers established within 3 rotations. The humans must learn their place in the new order quickly. As the meeting continued, none of the conquerors noticed the young Vorthak scientist in the corner, frantically working at his console. Dr. Velkin had been monitoring energy readings throughout the battle, and something was terribly wrong. The signatures didn't match any known human technology, yet they were everywhere. Faint pulses of exotic radiation that seemed to come from empty space itself. Commander. Velkin finally spoke up, his voice cracking with nervousness. I'm detecting anomalous readings across the system, some kind of background radiation that wasn't present before the battle. Zelthar waved a dismissive arm. Debris from destroyed vessels, nothing more. The humans used nuclear weapons in their desperation. Background radiation is to be expected. But Velkin persisted, though his scales shifted to show his discomfort at contradicting his superior. Sir, these readings are organized. They form patterns almost like something is hiding behind a veil we cannot see. The commander's eyes narrowed dangerously. Young scientist, we have the most advanced sensors in the galaxy. If there were hidden human ships, we would detect them. Return to your duties and speak no more of phantom readings. Velkin bowed and retreated, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The readings were getting stronger and they seemed to be moving. Slowly, carefully, but definitely moving. Down on Earth's surface, the occupation proceeded with surprising smoothness. Humans lined up at processing centers without protest. They accepted their assigned roles without complaint. They worked in the mines and factories with mechanical efficiency. It was so unlike the fierce warriors who had fought to the last ship, just days ago. Overseer Grack of the Krex supervised a processing center in what had once been Chicago. Thousands of humans passed through each day, receiving their work assignments and neural dampeners to prevent organized resistance. Yet something about their compliance disturbed him. Their eyes held no defeat, no despair. They looked almost patient. One human in particular caught his attention. A middle-aged woman with graying hair who wore the remnants of a military uniform. She stood in line with perfect posture, her gaze fixed on something beyond the walls of the center. When Grack approached her, she didn't flinch or look away. "You were military," he stated, his translator converting his clicks into English. She nodded, once. "Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen, formerly of the United Earth Defense Force. And now you surrender so easily? After all your species' talk of never giving up?" Chen's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "We know when we're beaten, Overseer. There's no point in throwing away lives in futile resistance." Something in her tone made Grack's chitin itch. He had conquered many species, and none had ever accepted defeat with such calm certainty. The humans should be angry, desperate, planning secret rebellions. Instead, they worked and waited with an almost serene patience that made no sense. Reports from across the occupied territories told similar stories. Humans cooperating fully, working efficiently, causing no problems. Mining operations were ahead of schedule. Factory production exceeded expectations. Even the neural harvesting for the Void Dancers proceeded without incident, the humans volunteering their memories with disturbing eagerness. Admiral Thex of the Void Dancers found the human neural patterns particularly intriguing. As his people, fed on the memories and experiences of the conquered, they usually encountered resistance, fear, anger. But the human patterns were different. Underneath the surface, thoughts of compliance was something else. A deep, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat, or a countdown. When Thex reported this to Zelthar, the commander dismissed it as psychological trauma from defeat. The humans are in shock. Their minds are protecting them from the reality of their situation. It will pass, but the anomalies continued to mount. Power grids in human cities showed unexplained spikes in usage despite the reduced population. Communication, arrays that should have been destroyed in the bombardment were somehow still drawing energy. Quantum fluctuations appeared in seemingly empty space around the solar system. Dr. Velkin worked through his rest cycles trying to understand what he was seeing. The patterns were becoming clearer now. Whatever was hidden out there wasn't just watching. It was positioning itself, moving into formation with a precision that suggested long preparation. On the 10th day of occupation, Velkin made a discovery that sent ice through his veins. The exotic radiation signatures matched theoretical models for something the Vorthak military had deemed impossible: large-scale quantum phase shielding. The ability to shift matter slightly out of phase with normal space-time, rendering it completely undetectable to conventional sensors. But that technology required enormous amounts of energy and computing power, far beyond what humans possessed. Unless they had been preparing for much longer than anyone realized. Unless what the Alliance had destroyed was exactly what humanity wanted them to destroy. Velkin ran to find Commander Zelthar, his data pad clutched in his trembling claws. But even as he ran, he knew it was already too late. The trap had been set long before the first Vorthak ship entered human space. And now, with the Alliance's forces spread thin across the occupied territories, focused on processing civilians and extracting resources, humanity was about to reveal its true hand. In the depths of space, hidden behind shields that bent light and space itself, Admiral Maria Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the TFS Vengeance. Around her, 300 Terran fleet ships waited in perfect formation. Ships built in secret shipyards hidden in the void between stars. Ships powered by zero-point energy reactors that humanity had developed while feeding the Alliance false intelligence about their technological capabilities. The Alliance had conquered Earth, just as humanity had planned. They had destroyed the decoy fleet, captured the sacrificial colonies, and occupied the surface cities filled with volunteers who knew their role in the grand deception. Every human who had died had done so knowing they were buying time for the real fleet to position itself. Rodriguez looked at her tactical display. The Alliance forces were perfectly positioned, spread out, and vulnerable, drunk on their easy victory. 2 days they had been allowed to believe they had won. 10 days for the hidden fleet to complete its deployment. 10 days for humanity to prepare its response to the galaxy's would-be conquerors. All ships, Rodriguez commanded, her voice carrying across the quantum-encrypted network to every vessel in the Shadow Fleet. Prepare to drop phase shields on my mark. Let's show these bastards what humanity is really capable of. The Shadow Fleet rises. The first sign of trouble came from Mining Station 7 in the asteroid belt. Overseer Krax of the Vorthak Dominion was reviewing production quotas when every human worker simultaneously stopped what they were doing. They didn't rebel or run. They simply stood still, looking up at the ceiling as if they could see through the metal and rock to the stars beyond. "What are you doing?" Krax demanded, his translator broadcasting the question to the assembled humans. "Return to work immediately." But the humans didn't move. One of them, a young man who had been operating a mineral processor, turned to face the overseer. His expression was calm, almost sympathetic. "It's time," was all he said. Before Krax could respond, every piece of human technology in the station came alive. Devices the Alliance had dismissed as primitive scrap suddenly hummed with power. Hidden transmitters activated, sending coded pulses through the asteroid's metal core. The lights flickered and went out, replaced by an eerie red emergency glow. Similar scenes played out across the occupied territories. On Mars, the Krex breeding farms lost power as human workers activated hidden EMP devices. On Earth, processing centers went dark as concealed generators overloaded the power grids. The lunar bases experienced simultaneous system failures that left Alliance forces scrambling in confusion. Commander Zelthar stood on his flagship's bridge as chaos erupted across his communication channels. Reports flooded in from every occupied world. Human workers had stopped cooperating. Hidden devices were activating. Systems were failing. But most disturbing of all were the sensor readings that Dr. Velkin was frantically trying to explain. "Commander, you must look at this." Velkin's voice cracked with fear. "The exotic radiation signatures are spiking everywhere. Something massive is about to happen." Zelthar finally turned his attention to the sensor displays, and what he saw made his scales turn white with shock. Energy readings were appearing throughout the solar system, not from any visible source but from empty space itself. The readings formed a perfect sphere around the occupied territories as if something enormous was surrounding them. "Battle stations," Zelthar roared. "All ships to combat positions. We are under attack." But even as his fleet scrambled to respond, he knew they were already out of position. The occupation had spread their forces thin. Ships were scattered across the system, guarding mining operations and transport routes. They had been deployed for occupation, not defense. The space around Earth suddenly rippled like water disturbed by a stone. Where there had been nothing, ships began to appear. Not just a few vessels, but hundreds. They materialized from nowhere, their hulls shimming as phase shields dropped to reveal the true might of the Terran fleet. These weren't the primitive vessels the Alliance had destroyed. These ships were sleek and angular, their hulls made from materials that seemed to absorb light. Weapons ports lined their surfaces, glowing with barely contained energy. Each ship was easily the match of any Alliance vessel, and there were so many of them. Admiral Rodriguez stood calm and composed as the TFS Vengeance fully materialized in normal space. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this moment for years in hidden facilities throughout the outer solar system. "Open a channel to the Vorthak flagship," she ordered. Zelthar's image appeared on the main screen, his forearms twitching with rage and disbelief. "What is this? How is this possible? We destroyed your fleet. We conquered your worlds." Rodriguez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You destroyed what we wanted you to destroy, Commander. Old ships crewed by volunteers who knew their sacrifice would sell the deception. You conquered cities filled with brave souls who played their parts perfectly. Every human who died knew they were buying time for this moment." "This is impossible," Zelthar snarled. "The energy requirements alone for phase shielding on this scale," Rodriguez interrupted him. "Did you really think a species capable of splitting the atom within decades of discovering radiation would remain technologically stagnant? We've had 50 years since first contact to prepare. 50 years of reverse engineering captured Alliance technology. 50 years of secret development hidden behind a carefully crafted facade of weakness." The Krex representative appeared on the screen, beside Zelthar, his mandibles clicking frantically. "You sacrificed billions of your own people for this deception." Rodriguez's expression hardened. 3 billion volunteers, Ambassador. Every one of them knew exactly what they were signing up for. They weren't sacrifices. They were heroes who gave their lives to ensure humanity's survival. Their families are safe in the deep bunkers you never detected, along with 8 billion others you never knew existed. The truth was staggering. Humanity had built entire cities underground and in hidden space stations, moving populations in secret while maintaining the illusion of a 12 billion surface population. They had constructed the Shadow Fleet in shipyards hidden in the void between Neptune and the Kuiper Belt, places the Alliance had never bothered to search because they believed humans lacked the technology to operate there. "But you're still outnumbered," Zelthar said desperately. "The Alliance has thousands of ships across the galaxy. You have mere hundreds." Rodriguez nodded. "True. But right now, those thousands of ships are scattered across 100 different systems. And we're not trying to conquer the galaxy, Commander. We're simply demonstrating that humanity will not go quietly into servitude." She gestured to her tactical officer. The Terran fleet moved as one, surrounding the scattered Alliance forces with surgical precision. Weapon systems that the aliens had never seen before powered up. Gravitational pulse cannons that could crush a ship like an empty can. Quantum torpedoes that phased through shields to detonate inside hulls. Directed energy weapons that could burn through the strongest armor in seconds. The first Alliance ship to fire was a Krex destroyer that panicked at finding itself surrounded. Its plasma cannon struck the shields of the TFS Defiance, only to watch in horror as the energy was absorbed and redirected back at them. The destroyer crumpled under its own reflected firepower. "Stand down," Rodriguez commanded across all frequencies. "This doesn't have to be a massacre. You came to conquer us because you believed we were weak. We let you believe that because the alternative was facing the combined might of the Alliance, before we were ready. But now you've seen our true capabilities. The question is, do you want this war?" The shard entity, Resonance, projected its thoughts to all present. "You deceived us, manipulated us. How can we trust anything you say?" "Lieutenant," Colonel Sarah Chen's voice came through the communications system. She was broadcasting from the Chicago Processing Center, where she now stood free of her restraints, surrounded by armed humans who had been hiding weapons in the very facilities the Alliance had built. "You can trust us because we could have destroyed you all by now," she said calmly. "Every processing center, every mining station, every occupation facility has been rigged with antimatter charges for the past week. We could have eliminated every Alliance soldier in the system with the push of a button. But we didn't. Because despite what you've done, we believe in giving even our enemies a chance to choose peace." The revelation sent waves of panic through the Alliance forces. They had been living surrounded by hidden bombs, guarded by humans who could have killed them at any moment. The level of coordination and self-control required for such a deception was beyond anything they had imagined humans capable of. Zelthar's mind raced. The Alliance had protocols for dealing with rebellions, but nothing like this. This wasn't a desperate last stand or guerrilla resistance. This was a carefully orchestrated revelation of power that changed everything. If humanity had this level of technology and strategic planning, what else were they capable of? "What are your terms?" he finally asked, his voice heavy with defeat. Rodriguez stood and walked closer to the view screen. First, immediate withdrawal of all Alliance forces from human space. Second, recognition of humanity as a sovereign power not subject to Alliance authority. Third, reparations for the 3 billion humans who gave their lives for this deception. Fourth, a non-aggression pact between humanity and the Alliance for the next 100 years. "And if we refuse?" Zelthar asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then we demonstrate to the entire galaxy that the Alliance can be defeated. We broadcast, on every frequency, how we deceived you, how we outmaneuvered you, how we could have destroyed you but chose mercy instead. How long do you think your empire will last when every conquered species realizes that resistance is possible?" It was checkmate. The Alliance's power rested on the perception of invincibility. If word spread that humans had successfully resisted, and even humiliated them, rebellions would spark across the galaxy. The empire built on fear and overwhelming force would crumble from within. The Void Dancer's representative spoke for the first time. "The neural patterns we harvested. They all carried the same underlying pulse. It was knowledge of this plan, wasn't it? Every human we processed knew this was coming." Rodriguez nodded. "Every single one. They carried the truth in their thoughts, knowing you would be too arrogant to look deeply enough to find it. You were so convinced of your superiority that you never questioned why we fell so easily." Zelthar felt the weight of failure crushing down on him. They had been played from the very beginning. Every Alliance victory had been orchestrated by humanity. Every strategic decision had been predicted and accounted for. The humans hadn't just won a military victory. They had won a psychological war that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of power. The commander's scales shifted through a spectrum of colors as he wrestled with the decision. Around him, his officers waited in tense silence. The human fleet maintained their positions, weapons armed but not firing. The patience they displayed was the same patience their ground forces had, shown during the occupation, the patience of predators who knew they had already won. Finally, Zelthar spoke, his voice carrying across all Alliance channels. "All forces stand down. Prepare for immediate withdrawal from human space. The Galactic Supremacy Alliance accepts humanity's terms." The relief in the chamber was palpable, but Rodriguez didn't celebrate. She knew this was just the beginning. Humanity had announced itself on the galactic stage not as conquerors but as strategists. They had shown that true power didn't come from the biggest guns or the largest fleets, but from the ability to think 10 steps ahead of your enemy. As Alliance ships began to power down their weapons and prepare for withdrawal, human vessels escorted them carefully. There was no gloating, no unnecessary aggression. The point had been made. Humanity would not be anyone's slaves, and they had the patience and intelligence to ensure it. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy watched in stunned silence as the full scope of humanity's deception was revealed. Hidden cities emerged from underground, space stations uncloaked in the outer system. The true population of 15 billion humans made themselves known. The technology they had developed in secret was shared selectively, proving that humanity could be valuable allies or terrible enemies. The 3 billion volunteers who had died were honored in a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. Their names were etched into monuments on every human world. They had not died as victims but as heroes who had played their parts in the greatest deception in galactic history. Commander Zelthar, in his final report to the Alliance Council, wrote something that would be studied by military strategists for generations. "We believed we were conquering primitives. Instead, we were actors in a play written by humanity. They sacrificed their pawns to position their queens. They let us take their cities while they prepared to take our empire. We didn't lose a war. We lost a game we didn't even know we were playing. The Terran fleet remained visible for exactly 1 standard year, long enough to ensure the Alliance honored its agreement. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they vanished again. Phase shields engaged, and hundreds of ships disappeared into the void. They were still there, everyone knew, watching and waiting. A silent reminder that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their ships. It was their ability to play the long game. And they played it better than anyone in the galaxy had imagined possible. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Vengeance as it slipped back into phase-shifted space. Earth hung in the viewport, no longer burning but beginning to rebuild. The scars would heal, the cities would rise again, and humanity would take its place among the stars not as subjects, but as equals. Her communications officer turned to her with a slight smile. "Admiral, we're receiving numerous diplomatic messages from species within the Alliance. They're requesting private meetings with human representatives." Rodriguez nodded. The real victory wasn't in the military confrontation. It was in showing the galaxy that the Alliance could be challenged. That freedom was possible for those brave enough and smart enough to take it. "Maintain the phase shields," she ordered. "Let them wonder where we are and what we're planning next." Uncertainty is another weapon in our arsenal. As the Terran fleet dissolved into invisible watchfulness, the galaxy entered a new era. The age of unquestioned Alliance dominance was over. The age of human influence had begun. And somewhere in the void, hidden behind shields that bent reality itself, humanity watched and planned their next move in the greatest game of all: survival among the stars. The story of humanity's deception spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Some called them terrorists for their tactics. Others called them liberators for showing that resistance was possible. But all agreed on one thing: never again would anyone underestimate the small, seemingly primitive species from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. They had celebrated too soon, and that premature celebration had cost them everything they thought they had won.